Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, February the 28th, 2025, and today we're going to talk about pigs in the garden, misting summer lettuce, and it's Feedback Friday. So let's do it. All right, well, we made it to another Friday. Cheers to us. The last one of the month, in fact, of February. So that's fun. Had a great day yesterday of just moving more mulch around, but I am a little bit concerned that my tree service friends are not going to come back again. Once again, I fear I came on a little bit too strong. Importantly, Racing Louisville dropped their new kits yesterday, and they are green and called the Roots kits. And I'm not saying they did that because they are the official professional women's soccer team of small-scale no-till market gardeners, but I'm not saying they didn't do that either. I think that's the right double negative. So yeah, all right, so it is Friday, and that means Feedback Fridays, where we look back at the week's topics and see what you all were saying. On Monday, we talked about accessing research that is behind a paywall, and there were a few really great comments on that subject, like this one from @Plato-Republic 5121, spelled like Plato, the stuff ground into your carpet, not Plato, the Greek philosopher. Quality pun there. Anyway, they write, quote, "Hi, Jesse, great show. I am a Minnesota beekeeper, and you might have known that beekeepers have been devastated by the Varroa mites these past 2 decades. About 10 years ago, there was an experiment in the Czech Republic with a beekeeper/researcher using heat treatment to kill the mites, but not hot enough to kill the bees. I wrote to the researcher that we live in the US/Minnesota, have never heard of this treatment before, and I asked him for a copy of his article since I could not get around the paywall. Grateful that he wrote his work in English. I replicated his work in my backyard apiary, and it worked very well. Useful for the backyard beekeeper, but not practical for the commercial beekeeper. I demonstrated this system to our local beekeepers association, and his work saved an unknown number of bee colonies. I also described my results to the Czech beekeeper/researcher as well. Going directly to the researcher can be very helpful to get needed information. Beekeepers are a close-knit group, regardless of nationality. We are continuously fighting our common enemies. Thank you for your shows, Jesse. I'm still rereading your no-till book. Chris, 5 acres in northern Minnesota, 4A/3B, end quote. All right, great stuff, Chris. This is what I'm always saying about research. The connection between researchers and the people who could actually use the research is not always well established, and that sucks because it could result in actual solutions to actual problems when it's adequately disseminated. But this is also why it's good, even as a farmer, to train yourself to read research papers. Even if only reading the introduction, you can learn a ton about whatever it is the subject of the paper is. Also, from @Gasperuch is helpful. They wrote, quote, "Many public libraries and university libraries have subscriptions to peer-reviewed publications and can get you copies, usually free of charge, with your library card. If it's not obvious when you go into the library, just ask the librarian," end quote. And thanks. So yeah, the papers are out there if you know where to look. On Tuesday, we talked about how much you can earn market gardening, and also, are you ready for March? And this from @BlinMD4DX sparked something I should say. First, they wrote, quote, "So Jesse, you said you were going to put your onion starts out in 2 weeks. We are in 7B. I am thinking this coming weekend will be good, hopefully," end quote. Thanks for the comment. And so I have no way of knowing if that would be the right time for you, but I want to make sure everyone understands that the things I'm doing on my farm that I talk about here are based on my context and my context only. So you can use them as a rough guide if you want. But when it comes to planting and starting your own stuff, just be pragmatic. Look at your forecast and make sure you are prepared for the worst case scenario, like a freeze in March. Don't rush. A lot of folks in our area often get their gardens out too early because it's nice out, only to lose them to freezes. Don't do that. The day I plant I will also just look at the forecast. Like 2 weeks from now is a rough estimate. If there's anything in there that looks threatening, I will hold off. Onions are hardy, but too many hard frosts can cause them to bolt. So everyone just be mindful. And thank you for the comment. Also, I'm going to save one of the questions/comments we got for the last segment because it's an interesting topic. Spoiler, it's about pigs. On Wednesday, we talked about pathways and bed sizes, and I liked these questions a lot from Kirsten Cornelise, who wrote, quote, "Hi, Jesse. Me and my partner are in the middle of designing our own farm. I was wondering what width pathway and bed you would recommend for a CSA where clients come and harvest their own share. Some farmers make pathways wider because clients come with children, for example. Second question, with beds smaller than 60 centimeters, how easy is it to access with a wheelbarrow? Won't it damage the beds? Thanks in advance, end quote. Okay, so I love these questions. So to your first question about the size to make the paths for customers who are going to sort of do a U-pick, well, part of that will depend on how you plan to manage the paths, wood chips, bare living pathways, whatever, but I would definitely not go smaller than 18 inches, 14 centimeters, or it becomes a bit of a U smash, like you said, with the kids. But really make the pathway management make sense for you first, and then decide how to adjust it for the customers. Keep in mind, customers can't always tell the difference between like a bed and a pathway. For us, especially with the living pathways, even people with gardening experience struggle to know what's a bed and what's a pathway. So just keep that in mind. To the second part of the question about 60 centimeter beds, which is roughly 2 feet wide for the American audience. So 60 centimeters and wheelbarrows, it just depends on the wheelbarrow. Some of these two-wheeled wheelbarrows that's a tough combination of words. Some of these two-wheeled wheelbarrows may have 2-foot clearance, that 60 centimeter clearance. So you may just have to measure them or look it up. They may also help you determine your pathway though. So because you will want the wheelbarrow to fit the paths if you can't have it straddle your beds. Otherwise you're going half in your bed and half in your pathway when you're pulling the wheelbarrow, which actually happens a lot on our farm because I think our wheelbarrow base is closer to 20 inches or something. So yeah, that can be a problem. Then yesterday we talked about the pest-free squash, and I liked this from @ShellBailey, who wrote, quote, I have tried insect netting, starting my squash inside, delaying my planting, spraying nymphs, burning debris, rotating them as far as I can, and skipping years, and still cannot get rid of my squash bug problem. It's bad enough that they have an effect on watermelon and winter squash, and I stopped growing squash and pumpkins altogether. UMass says they like no-till. If anyone has ideas, I'd welcome them, end quote. Thanks, and I should say I don't want my comments about pest-free squash here on my farm to come off as flippant because I know people do suffer from them even when they do everything right. Sometimes it's something simple, like they've just built up the populations locally that they're going to be a more difficult problem to address. The comment about no-till, however, is weird because squash bugs like every kind of agriculture. I can't imagine they like necessarily one over the other. Some ideas is that they overwinter under debris. Like you said, you burned it, but if you leave a lot of debris at the end of the season around the garden or on the beds, that could house them. Penn State's extension recommends placing a board on the ground on cooler nights during the growing season, and then they will collect underneath. Then you can eliminate them the next morning. So do that maybe while your plant is growing, and just periodically throughout the season kind of scrape them off into maybe like a bucket of water and some soap to kind of keep those in check. And I'd also be curious, now that you said you've stopped growing those things altogether, if that reduced the populations a little bit. Also, if you're doing the squash from starts, make sure that you cover the squash in the greenhouse. I think this is sometimes underappreciated. They will find the transplants as well, depending on how big they are, how mature they are, how exposed those greenhouses are. And you may have already tried that, but just being no-till is not the cause. Every form of agriculture struggles with squash bugs. And anecdotally, we definitely struggle more with them on a tillage farm than a no-till farm. So yeah, anyway, great stuff as always. I could spend all day sharing your all's brilliant comments. Like I say, I've got the smartest comment section on YouTube. It just never quits. But I've got some things I'd like to share about misting summer lettuce. So let's do that after the break. BRB. Hacia la felicidad. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Farmhand. I don't know about you, but I got into farming to be in the field growing food for my community, not creating elaborate pack lists, not writing newsletters or responding to emails, not designing and maintaining web stores, and etc. And I especially don't enjoy doing those things after an already full and fulfilling day of growing food. Actually, if I spent less time on my phone and behind the computer, that would be great. If only there were a solution for that. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for farmers. With one single platform, Farmhand enables you to offload your administrative tasks, send and manage communications, and sell more to your customers. Farmhand saves growers an average of 6 hours of administrative load each week.
That's 6 hours so you can get back into the field, spend more time with friends or family, or have a life outside of the farm, which is actually a thing. Think about it. What would you do with an extra 6 hours a week? Sign up for a free trial with the link in the show notes, because now is the best time to dial in those systems for the next growing season. Follow the farmhand link in the show notes to learn more. All right, back to the show.
If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member George Baker, who asks, quote, "Hey Jesse, love the podcasts, your book and videos. I'm looking forward to trying to grow lettuce this summer using your methods of shade cloths and overhead watering. I've seen your videos on the topic and read about it in your book. The one thing that I'm missing is how often and for how long one should water to keep the lettuce cool. Now, I realize that every area is different, but I think it would help a lot to have a starting point. Also, I'd love to hear about your overhead watering setup as well. If it helps, I'm in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, area zone 8B, and unless you have advice to the contrary, plan on using 30% shade cloth and wobblers about 2 feet up. We'll be planting Salanova. Thanks so much for the huge amount of time and money you spend helping us all out. It is really appreciated and clearly a labor of love for you and your team." End quote. Okay, awesome. So thanks, George, and thanks for the excellent question. I will do another full-on sort of summer lettuce show closer to the season, but for those of you trying to plan that out now, here is what has worked for me on our farm in the middle of the summer here in Kentucky, Zone 6B. First, hardening the plant off before transplanting is a good idea. I usually harden them off for a minimum of 3 days before they go into the field by setting them on a table outside of the greenhouse and keeping them watered. Then when I transplant, I do that first thing in the morning and water them in very well. They have got to go into cool, moist soil to do well. Then or even at the same time, I cover them with 30% shade cloth, like you said, to establish them for at least a week. I have tried keeping the shade cloth on for the entire duration of their lives, and although the leaves are really nice, like really tender, that way the weight decreases significantly, so I find it's not worth keeping the shade cloth on for more than like a couple or a few weeks. You can grow really beautiful tender lettuce that way, and there may be interest from chefs and that kind of thing, but just doesn't weigh anything, so you'd have to account for that in the pricing. Instead, I remove the shade cloth once the plants are established and start a misting routine with the wing sprinklers from DripWorks, but wobblers are fine too. It doesn't really matter which of those two you choose. In fact, wobblers would probably be better because they irrigate better, and I've thought about switching over to wobblers for the future for that reason, because moisture makes a significant difference in the yield on lettuce. Like for instance, we dry farm most of our lettuce for the most part. Like we barely water it. What we do is we mist it to keep it cool, but we're not really irrigating it. So I thought about switching over to the wobbler because in drought years like last year, we lost a lot of yield. When it's a drought, the exact same bed can weigh 2/3 or 1/2 the amount that a spring bed can. So it's a huge deal. So anyway, it has changed over the years, and obviously on rainy or cloudy days, we modify it, but on a typical bright, hot, sunny day, we run our sprinklers over the lettuce for roughly 2 minutes every hour from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the peak of the summer. I used to run them for 4 minutes, but I think that's a bit overkill, may not be for you. And they're in Myrtle Beach. If we're going to irrigate, which by that I just mean water the plants and not just mist them, I just switch the irrigation on at 3 a.m. or so when I get up and run it for however long I need to, and then turn it off before the sun comes up. You could also do that at night, but I'm not really a night person. I'm a morning person who gets up in the middle of the night. I think there's a difference. The timer I use is the 6-zone Galcon programmable timer, and I'll link it in the show notes. Not necessarily a recommendation. I have no issues with it. It's fine. I haven't tested other ones though, so there's potentially a better one out there. Now, I do try not to overdo the misting because it can promote rot at the bottom of it, like at the base of the plants. But so far we've had good luck, and we can still get our roughly 75 pounds per 50 by 4 foot bed, 200 square feet for their first cutting. Second cuttings are dependent on the weather, though with Muir mixed into our Salanova, we usually get some amount of a second cutting, maybe like 50% of the first cutting or more. That plant is a beast. Muir is worth mixing in. The leaves are a little big and wide, but you can kind of cut those up as you harvest. Summer lettuce is a really high value and easy to sell crop in hotter climates, but you will have to charge a premium because it is just not easy to grow. You will not make money on it if you don't like make up for that cost somehow. The cost of the irrigation, the misting, the water, just the time, the amount of effort put into it, all those things. Anyway, I will detail the whole process in coming months because the thing with summer lettuce is that you have to do every part of it thoughtfully, or it's just a waste of time and money. And like George said, I have also done the videos about it, so I will link those in the show notes. Anyway, hope that's helpful. Let's end the weekend talking about pigs and gardens, because why not? It's almost March. Let's do it. Be right back. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by GrowSmart. Curious if your soil will be ready for planting this spring? GrowSmart can help you find out with their at-home soil tests. They'll ship it right to your door. Just send it back with your prepaid shipping and you'll have your lab results in just 2 business days. Their reports are simple with tailored seasonal recommendations for fertilizers and amendments. Order now at growsmart.com and use the code DAILY for 10% off. That's DAILY. Begin your soil prep now for a great spring with GrowSmart. All right, back to the show. All right, so on Tuesday, we talked about FSMA regulations and exemptions, and there was a comment that I started to include in the Feedback Friday segment, but I also thought that it had a lot of interesting stuff to touch on. So the comment came from at Jeremy Klein Z3C, who wrote, quote, you brought up the FSMA 91-20 day rule for raw manure. We have a small 40 by 20 fenced in garden here in Southern Illinois, Zone 6B. After doing some research, we were thinking about getting a feeder pig this fall to winter over in the garden and then take to market next February 2026. Given that the last frost here is usually April, we do not normally start planting until last April, early May. Will that be enough time for the raw manure to dissipate and be safe to plant plants in? End quote. Okay, awesome stuff. Thanks, Jeremy. The one thing I'm just going to address the 91-20 day rule right off the bat, because the thing with that is it is literally for the rule for like organic certification in FSMA, it is just to the day. So like the last day the pigs are on that plot is the last day it's considered to be manured. So you have to, I would just look it up and get exactly 90 or 120 days. So it's 90 days for anything that is above the ground, like tomatoes or eggplants or whatever. You can't harvest that for 90 days. Or it's 120 days for anything that's in the ground. So that would be like potatoes or carrots or something like that. You can't harvest those things for 120 days from the last day the pigs were on that plot. So it's not about, it's kind of arbitrary. It's not about like a specific set of time. They just want to make sure it's been 90 or 120 days. And some inspectors, et cetera, will hold you to that, like directly to those days. So I would just err on the safe side, go an extra day or two just to be safe. Now, and you may know some of what I'm about to say, but in case folks don't, I want to talk about pigs and gardens. And we have raised pigs several times over the years, and I love pigs. They have incredible personalities. However, a couple things to know. One, pigs are not the best plows in the world, bless their hearts. Don't get me wrong, pigs will plow, absolutely. But in case that's your goal, they will not plow like you or I would, but more haphazardly with holes in some areas, mounds in others. If you were building a mogul's course, use pigs. A garden, maybe not so much. The other thing that pigs do, especially in a wet, hot place like Southern Illinois, is wallow. So they will dig a pit, and then when it rains, they will use that pit to create mud and cool off. Now, that may not seem like a big deal, but because you can just smooth those areas out after the pig is left, but those wallows will create compaction that you will ultimately have to deal with. Also, pigs are smart and will deposit all of their manure in a sort of bathroom area and leave their feeding areas clean, so the distribution of fertility won't be great. Pigs are also social creatures, so I wouldn't recommend just one. 2 pigs is actually kind of less to deal with because a pig by itself may work to get out more than a pig with company. Now, you could move them frequently in paddocks to reduce the damage that they cause to one area, but that is no small amount of work. We've done that several times in the past, not to start gardens, but just to minimize their impact on forests and stuff. But especially when they get big, the pigs will do their damage and wallowing and even plowing in a matter of hours. A lot of folks who run pigs give them a pretty substantial portion of ground in the forest and elsewhere or in pastures or whatever to keep them busy and to keep them from concentrating their effort on like a small plot of land. Also, there are breeds like the Kune Kune. They are not heavy rooters, but you also have to offer them a lot of pasture for them to grow at a reasonable pace, which they also grow slow and are known for their high fat content versus their heavy muscle from presumably from the rooting. So that's just some stuff to think about with pigs. But anyway, I just figured I would touch on some of my pig experience because I love pigs. I've always enjoyed raising them, but like any livestock, you really have to have a thoughtful plan for managing them or they will cause more harm than good. All right. It's the freaking weekend, everyone. Soccer practice starts next week. March starts next week. Don't forget to update your MLS Fantasy League. Just keep that in mind every Friday. Anyway, it's about to be an absolute party here, so no turning back now. I'll wrap it up there, but before we go, I want to give one last shout out to the good folks over at Rimmel Greenhouses for making this show possible. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit Rimmel.com today to get growing. Big thank you to all of our show sponsors for the month of February. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No-Till Growers. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of February or March, you get a shout on the show. So big shout outs today to Kat Saucer. Oh, that's a fun name, Kat. Kat Saucer. Good stuff. Lena and Inarkazak. That's right. And it's our weeklies. Randall Duran, Alex and Oliver, Maina, Stacy Moorman, Bill King, Chris Yates, and Stephen Smith. So in this story, our weeklies and their new friends are tending a community garden in South Dakota. And in one garden sprouts some, like a mighty, some would say maybe even magical beanstalk. And so naturally, everybody climbs up because that's like what you have to do when you see a giant beanstalk. So they all climb it up. But at the top, what they do find is giants, right? There's no mystery there. They are giants. But these giants are actually not like after them, because they are actually pretty excited to share their work because they're amazing agrarians. So they're nothing really like in the storybooks. I mean, only one person gets eaten, but it was technically an accident. So, friendly giants, good agrarians, very funny too, very clever. They just dropped a bean out of the sky, which, happens. So anyway, thanks for watching and/or listening. Have a great weekend, everyone. We will see you on Monday. On March. Yeah.